After everything I've seen, after all these years spent listening to time pass, I've come to understand something no one ever taught me. The greatest leak in your life is not your schedule. It is not your age. It is not the number of hours you have in a day. It is the time you spend trying not to die instead of living. I have watched people avoid risks, avoid silence, avoid stillness, avoid the present moment, as if truly living were something dangerous, as if slowing down meant falling behind, as if feeling too deeply would somehow break them. And in doing so, they let life slip away, quietly, gradually, almost invisibly, not all at once, but in small moments they never allowed themselves to experience, moments they rushed through, moments they measured instead of felt, moments they replaced with plans, goals, and distractions. And one day, those moments are gone, not because time ended suddenly, but because they were never truly lived. I don't fix clocks the way I used to. I don't chase precision anymore. I don't believe that perfection has anything to do with time. Now I simply listen. The sound is still here, tick-tock, but it no longer feels like urgency. It feels like presence, like a reminder that every second only has meaning if it is experienced. So if there is anything I can leave you with, not as a watchmaker, but as someone who has lived long enough to understand what truly matters, it is this. Stop counting seconds. Start counting the moments when you forgot to look at the clock, because those moments are the only ones that were ever truly yours. After that, I began to see the clocks differently. I would lift my eyes and look at the wall in front of me, filled with hundreds of them, each one ticking at its own pace, each one showing a different time, none of them synchronized, none of them perfect. And for the first time that made sense to me, because life has never been precise, it has never been exact, it has never been something that could be adjusted with the turn of a tool or the tightening of a screw. For decades, I had been fixing hands, aligning seconds, correcting tiny mechanical errors, but I started to realize something deeper. I was only touching the surface. I was adjusting what people could see, while everything that truly mattered remained untouched. The mechanism inside, the part that doesn't tick but beats, the heart. And once that thought settled in me, I could no longer see my work the same way. One afternoon, someone walked into my shop just like all the others before, rushed, distracted, impatient. They placed their watch on my table and spoke quickly, asking for precision, asking for accuracy, asking for control. I looked at the watch. Then I looked at them. And for the first time in my life, I said something I had never said before. Life is not a precision clock. I paused. I placed my hand gently against my chest. It is a heartbeat. The room went quiet. The clocks kept ticking. But something else filled the space. Understanding, or maybe discomfort. Because in that moment, I wasn't talking about the watch anymore. I was talking about everything. About the illusion that if you fix the outside, the inside will follow. About the belief that control equals meaning. About the quiet truth that no amount of adjustment can replace awareness. You can align every second of your day. You can measure every step you take. You can calculate every detail of your existence. But if you ignore what's happening within you, none of it matters. You can align every second of your day. You can measure every step you take. You can calculate every detail of your existence. But if you ignore what's happening within you, none of it matters. And that realization, once it arrives, it changes everything. Because you begin to understand that time is not something you fix, it is something you feel. Now, when I look at the world outside, I see the same pattern repeating itself, over and over again. The same rush, the same restless energy, the same invisible pressure that keeps people moving, even when they no longer know why they're running. I watch people walking through the streets with their eyes fixed on screens, checking the time, tracking their steps, measuring their progress, as if life were something that needed constant validation. And I can't help but think, you are living as if time were a resource, something to manage, something to optimize, something to stretch, compress, and control. But it isn't. Time is an experience, and the more you try to control it, the further away you move from actually living it. I see people feeling guilty for resting, as if stillness were a waste, as if doing nothing were a failure. I see people afraid to enjoy something simple, a meal, a moment, a quiet pause, without turning it into data, without measuring it, without asking if it was productive. And that fear, that constant need to justify every second, it slowly drains something essential from life. Because living like that is exhausting. It turns existence into a task. It transforms moments into obligations. It replaces presence with performance. And in the end, you're always chasing something, another goal, another milestone, another version of yourself that you believe will finally feel complete. Among all the people who ever walked into my shop, there was one I could never forget. His name was Jonathan. He was the kind of man who commanded attention without needing to say much. Always well-dressed, precise in his movements, focused, sharp, and always in a hurry. He wore watches that cost more than everything inside my workshop combined, yet somehow he was never satisfied with them. It's gaining a few seconds, Arthur. It was always the same, a few seconds. Nothing that could truly change a life, and yet to him, it meant everything. I would adjust the watch with care. He would thank me, but before even reaching the door, his attention had already shifted. His phone was in his hand. Messages, numbers, schedules, always something waiting. Jonathan lived a controlled life. Every minute had a purpose. Every meal was calculated. Every step was tracked. Every heartbeat was monitored. He was, without a doubt, prepared. But he was not at peace. I remember watching him one afternoon while he waited. He couldn't sit still. His eyes moved around the room, but they weren't really seeing anything. His body was there, but his mind was somewhere else entirely. And in that moment, a thought came to me, quiet, almost like a whisper. He knows exactly how much time he has, but he doesn't know how to live inside it. Then one day, Jonathan stopped coming. At first I assumed he was busy. Men like him always are. But then I heard. He died, 52 years old. A heart attack. Sitting at his desk, surrounded by numbers, charts, data, everything he had spent his life trying to control, and none of it could save him. But what stayed with me wasn't just his death. It was the realization that he had never stopped. Not once. Never to truly breathe, never to look around, never to simply exist without measuring, without tracking, without controlling. And that day, the silence inside my workshop felt louder than any clock I had ever heard. I always believed that time was something that could be fixed. I spent more than 70 years inside a small workshop in the heart of Chicago, surrounded by clocks of every kind. Wall clocks, old and worn, pocket watches passed down through generations, modern wristwatches, each one with its own rhythm, its own sound, its own story. But deep down, they all carried the same thing. The anxiety of the people who brought them to me. The sound never left me. Tick-tock, tick-tock. It was constant, hypnotic, almost as if time itself had a voice whispering endlessly inside that quiet, dust-filled room. People always walked in the same way, in a hurry, restless eyes, unsteady hands. Before even speaking to me, many would glance at their watches, as if time might slip away if they didn't keep checking it. "It's running late, Arthur. I need absolute precision. I can't afford to lose time." I listened, but I rarely answered right away. I observed. I watched the way they spoke, the way they breathed, the way they couldn't stand still even for a few seconds. And over the years, I began to notice something that no one else seemed to see. They weren't there because of the clock. They were afraid. Afraid of being late, afraid of not being enough, afraid that time was running out, even if they didn't know what for. And there I was, carefully adjusting seconds with delicate tools, while watching entire lives completely out of rhythm, out of alignment, out of meaning. It was a quiet irony. They wanted me to fix time, but they didn't realize that what truly needed fixing was the way they were living. And it was there, between tiny gears and the constant sound of time passing, that something inside me began to shift. Slowly, quietly, I started to understand that the problem was never the delay. Over the years, the city outside changed faster than any clock I had ever held in my hands. Chicago became louder, faster, more impatient. People stopped carrying simple watches and began wearing devices that promised to measure everything: steps, calories, heartbeats, sleep quality. It was as if life itself had been reduced to numbers, charts, and performance goals, and I witnessed it up close. Men would walk into my shop wearing watches more advanced than any machine I had ever worked on, yet their eyes told a different story: exhaustion, anxiety, a kind of emptiness that no technology seemed able to fill. They wanted more precision, always more control over their bodies, more control over their time, more control over their existence. And the more control they chased, the less present they seemed to be. I remember watching a man speak to me while checking his wrist every few seconds, as if the moment he was in, right there, standing in front of me, wasn't worthy of his full attention. As if living was something secondary, something that happened in between planning the next thing. That began to trouble me, not as a watchmaker, but as someone who had spent a lifetime listening to time. Because time is not just measurement. It cannot be contained in numbers. It cannot be reduced to productivity. Time is feeling, it is memory, it is presence. But out there, no one seemed interested in that anymore. They didn't want to experience time. They wanted to control it, as if that were possible, as if that were necessary. And that was the moment something inside me truly shifted. I stopped seeing clocks as tools, and I began to see them as symbols, symbols of a quiet obsession. The obsession of trying to control something that was never meant to be controlled.